point to us and just make sure people know DJ and I are setting this up, and DJ is doing all the technical stuff on the YouTube side. It's just been so much fun doing this together with DJ, and this whole expanding the platform from a journal into all these things, this teaching a course with so much of your work here, doing this reading series. It is so much fun. And it's just a different way of dealing with literature. Ken, hi. Hello, everybody. Wonderful to see you all here. It's just a delight to have these 11 people here in front of me, sharing with me in the first public reading from the Practices of Hope journal of About Place. This is a reading that is run by, from, and through the Black Earth Institute. And DJ and myself, who are the editors of the special issue, are fellows of the Black Earth Institute. We and a wonderful bunch of people are spending 3 years together, developing connections to earth, spirit, and poetry. And so this journey here of Practices of Hope is part of that. We have 4 readings for you. And in the last one, we also will have the editor, the next journal, join us to read as well. Tonight, we're having 9 readers, and we're going to move right in. I want to acknowledge that we're reading in revolutionary times, and I hope and that you will find, just like the editorial team felt, that these readings speak to this moment. They speak to revolution, to hope, to rage, and to the fact that there are different futures available for us. So I want to make sure that we ground ourselves in a sense of being on a journey together towards better futures. So I'm going to give the voice first to Margaret Noodin. Just gonna move to that. Okay. So Meg, if you unzoom. Oh yeah, the other things I need to say here is we're recording this. We're recording this right now, and we are on YouTube Live. DJ, who is the co-host of this meeting, is moderating the YouTube part of this. So if we would love you all to, the people who are not the actual speakers, we would love other people to introduce themselves on the YouTube stream. If you're comfortable doing that, we would just love to know who you all are, because we don't see your tiles, we don't see your pictures in front of us. We only see ourselves. So please let us know who you are, where you are, so that we can then watch it in the YouTube stream later on. If you have any questions, please feel free to address them. DJ is going to be monitoring that throughout. And she's also putting the bios of all our participants in the chat window of the YouTube live stream. And lastly, if any of you feel that you would benefit from having access copies, we have access copies available. If you go to the link through which you found this reading, then you will see there's another link to the journal itself, and against every person's name is a direct link to their poem, reading, or artwork. So you have more than one way of engaging with this. That's part of our disability provision. Okay, I think I covered all the introductory ground. And with that, Margaret Noodin. There you go, my dear.
Miigwech, Petra. It's a real treat to be here. It's an honor to be with all of these people in this space. And it's, I guess, something we're getting used to. We can't necessarily be with people in person, but all of the folks here are names that I have seen and known, and it is just wonderful to be in the same kind of connected reading space. So it's really a nice thing to do this evening. And I will start out by just saying, as a poet from within the Great Lakes who writes in our indigenous language, Anishinaabemowin, I find that it's fun to have people hear the language and have it kind of echo and resonate with folks, but sometimes people like to see it. So I will try to share the screen so you can see the words as I read them. I'll read it first in Anishinaabemowin so you can enjoy that. I write all of the poems in Anishinaabemowin first. So my belief is that they sound better in that language because I've kind of been able to play with the rhythm and the resonance a different way, but I will also read it in English as well. So I'll try and do that if I can do it correctly. And this was written specifically for this project, thinking about the place that we are in and what I feel about the space that I live in and how I might share the sense of being there. Gimeme'igonaan omaa. Bidabang ani bongi shimon. Gimewang ani gakijawang. G'Me'igonaan Ziganagwak. Zibenskedamang. Manidok manidun sika zawat. Me'igonaan omaa. Gishkabagwat gawandak. Zigaan doyang bingwak. Me'igonaan ishkwa. Nishadendamong. Nojamo adozoyang. This place is our lullaby, sunrise to sunset, rainfall to waterfall. This place is our warning, storm clouds and sorrow, spirits in the smallest form. This place becomes us, thirst of the white spruce, baptism of the earth's ash. This place remembers us after we fall apart and then put ourselves back together. So I will stop sharing there, having given you a taste of the language from the Great Lakes. And I do feel, as Petra mentioned, we are living through historic times. And for all of my Black students and Black colleagues, I have been teaching everyone to say, Apitendago Zewakmekadewijik, which is Black Lives Matter. And we just need to keep saying it. So thank you very much. Gimeme'igonaan.
Thank you so much. That was a wonderful beginning with Black Lives Matter and with the fact that this is our land, this is where we are, and the land will carry us into the future. It's a beautiful beginning. And this was also the beginning of the workshop that DJ and I led together last month about the practices of hope reading. So we started with Meg's poem, and then we moved to Corey Pressman's piece, Consider the Cricket, which we're going to hear from now.
Okay.
Corey, I'm gonna.
You all hear me okay?
Can you? Yeah.
Am I hearable? Yes, that nod means yes, right? Okay, I remember that now. Thank you. I don't know what to share. The idea of sharing on a screen is a great idea. Maybe if I share this. Can you all see that? This is a story about the future, and futurism, the kind of futurism that I find to be most useful is the futurism that imparts optimism of some kind. And I'm not a dystopia person, but more finding hope in science fiction. And hopefully that's what this story does. Although it's not necessarily a story, it's sort of a piece of paratext from the future. I traveled far ahead and found this snippet, which might remind us that there are so many possible futures. And this one's about eating in the future, eating on Mars in the future in particular. This is an excerpt from a piece called Consider the Cricket, which, as you might remember, is the forward to the 2419 edition of Neela Jarko's How to Cook a Space Wolf. Does anyone have that book on their shelves yet? Not yet, soon, a couple hundred years. It starts this way, the bargain. A Martian cricket leads a dreadful life, but despite the personal experience of a sole camel cricket residing in the Keat Towers of Meridiani, these magnificent little creatures are nothing less than the basis of all extraterrestrial human habitation. So there's that. In effect, civilization itself may be viewed as a symptom, a side effect of some other creature, such as wheat, corn, or rice, having persuaded humans into a bargain. You scratch our back, and we'll scratch yours. Humanity's very presence on Mars is really a contemporary analog of the agreements made with beans, maize, and barley some 12,000 years ago. Now it's the cricket's turn. It's fitting that the creatures that instigated the earliest terrestrial civilizations were plants. Bound to earth and slaves to the sun, they molded human civilization in their own sedentary image. But now look at us, bounding between worlds, skipping through space, lifted up and out of Earth's gravity well on the back of our humble savior, the cricket. Every school child can recite the virtues of our most populous neighbor. 2 times the protein of beef, more vitamin B than salmon, more iron than spinach. Plus, Martian varieties breed prolifically in low light, low temperatures, and low gravity. And while not all the recipes in Jarko's How to Cook a Space Wolf employ cricket as the center of plate protein, every locally sourced ingredient is somehow indebted to our little friend. Tons of fresh cricket frass fertilize every acre of the vertical farms at Pevanas, and each grow pillow in private chili gardens from the lava tube homesteads of Arcia Mons to the myriad apartments in our greatest dome town, New Austin. The strong, nutty aroma of roasted cricket powder colors many of our printed favorites. Who hasn't enjoyed the pleasure of printed flatbread from Hellas Planitia, or the extruded noodles and savory broths of the famous Martian holiday hot pot feasts, pages 67 to 77. Classics all, and each 100% reliant on the toil of the Martian cricket ranchers in calderas around the world. Speaking of spice blends, anyone can appreciate the completest approach to Martian harissa displayed in How to Cook a Space Wolf. Jarko really did her homework here. She personally traveled to every elevator port and major city on Mars, and even a few of the remote intangible centers on the high slopes of Olympus Mons. At each spot, she collected local approaches to harissa, curating and compiling the many regional dimensions of this emblematic Martian condiment. Of course, these all display a common denominator: heat. As Jarko so deftly explains, the wolf at our door is a vast adversary. The wolf that is space, the vacuum, Hoover the wolf, will eat you in a second. Just crack the door a mere millionth of a millimeter and he's in, boiling your blood and emptying your lungs forever. In response, we must lock up, stay indoors, or in suit at all times, always. Martian life is, if anything, buttoned up very tight. Regardless if you reside in a humble flux collective tunnel commune at Medusae Fossae, or a resplendent dome dwelling at Utopia Planitia, you breathe the same recycled air, obey the same 30% Earth gravity, eat the same ubiquitous red dust that follows us in from the cold. As every extraterrestrial person knows, these conditions take a toll on your sinuses, your senses, and your sanity. If not careful, a Martian can succumb to the constant habitat-induced head cold and crushing malaise that is dome flu. And while it is fun to watch tourists suffer thusly, it is no way to live. Martian cuisine has adapted the perfect means to cook this wolf: spicy food, very spicy food. Heat gets the sinuses flushed. It wakes up the senses. A Mars harissa will flush your air-tired eyes with hot tears and muster your mind to attention. Good, strong spice can awaken the duende at the heart of every Martian. The heat also does well to brighten the sometimes monotonous aspect of everyday staples like printed cricket teff flatbread, page 5, and garam masala mushroom sous vide, page 6. Just as the cricket enables and signifies our leap to Mars, another being at once allows and symbolizes our life off Earth: the mushroom. This little colonist thrives in dark places. Mushrooms hug destruction, feeding on the rot, and like our own brave endeavor, transform regolith into soil, stone into nutriment, Mars into home. We all win when the black trumpet mushrooms are harvested for New Year's every September. While not a culinary experience per se, I would be remiss if I did not dwell for a moment on the other, more spiritual utility of the Martian mushroom. The internal experience gifted by the dark star psilocybe mangala mushroom is central to the coming of age ceremonies for every native of Mars. Cultivated in the rich soil beds of the pollen tube complex, these pale creatures are dried, pounded into a powder, and ingested via the ceremonial and flavorful beet sugar slurry, page 110, traditionally consumed when we each reach age 19, 35, 50, 70, and 110. And while we are discouraged from divulging the details of our ceremonial Mangala journeys, I feel confident saying that these mushrooms provide a nutriment as essential as those found in any Earth-imported vitamin supplement or red romaine salad with strawberry vinaigrette and monster chives, page 36. Many readers will no doubt delight on the final entry in this great book. The recipe for sweet spiraling Martian moss gel marks a truly monumental moment in the history of all human eating. Discovered growing in the craggy northern Icelands, the Spiralum brachium martis, or spiraling Martian moss, is the first extraterrestrial life form ever discovered and the first extraterrestrial ingredient. As such, this recipe is the first dish of a truly Martian cuisine. No wonder it is already being served at any and all official functions. Every recipe on how to cook a space wolf is a testament to the courage and ingenuity required to colonize humanity's second world. Each is also an homage to the most important aspect of our success, love. Our love keeps us cooking for each other and for ourselves. Our love of our world and of our mission of togetherness keeps us building and striving and expanding our species, quote, beyond the horizon, end quote, as the early Martian poets said. And all this is on the shoulders of the cricket that sits at the base of our whole nutritional enterprise. Indeed, what is more Martian than the beautiful and ubiquitous round song of a million crickets falling away and rising in every distance? It is no mystery why are they the subject of so much contemporary Martian verse, including this appropriate haiku from the Martian master June Chat Noir. Hopping higher than any of our ancestors, cricket, carry me. Corey S. Pressman, April 49th, 2419, Gates City, Mars. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Corey. This really interesting story, and its voice, its fabulous voice, was really helpful for our workshops as well. I was telling Corey before we started recording that when DJ and I taught the Practices of Hope work, we also had an exercise where we invited people in the workshop to go and find 2 flavors in their kitchen. So it was in pandemic time, so we were staying where we were. We went into our kitchen and found 2 flavors, 2 spices, and then thought about their cultural history and also their potential futures. So that was a really interesting thing to work with your story. Thank you.
I love the idea of the future of spice as a...
Yeah. Okay, and now I am going to go back to this one, and I'm going to Sydney. I'm going to move my window a little bit. Sydney Epps, here we go. I'm pinning you. Here we are. Sydney, over to you.
Hello, and thank you all for giving me the time to read this poem aloud. This would be the first time that I do. However, it is an aged piece. I wrote this in 2014, I believe. It was right after Eric Gardner's death in New York City. And that was the gentleman who was choked out by a police officer. And I believe that is where the sentiment of I Can't Breathe being a part of the Black Lives Matter movement began. But this all very much tied to experiences of discrimination and reaffirming oneself and one's community through understanding that the natural given essence of one's being is not what is on what is hated, but it is tied to a instability, a jealousy, a worry of really admitting to historical sins that we all are involved in and that we continue to perpetuate because we don't want to face various truths about our histories and our realities. So with that being said, this title, Nina Taught Me, is an ode to Nina Simone, an activist, a beautiful singer and writer in her time. And if you know the song that this is tied to be young, gifted, and Black, there are lines within it that are interwoven and played with throughout the poem. So with that being said, let's begin. Is it a sin in this skin? No, it is a blessing. See, the best teacher I had was this rap, gifting a knowledge more potent in college a test that got y'all shook. People of color got books of this real accounting, mounting. Emotional intelligence became relevant when I realized the problem wasn't me. The girl, the girl is good, but I'm not better because I left the hood, and this climb brought new insight. Gave me the experience to see through various eyes the pile of lies in which we've uncovered. The battered bodies of police threats were all targets, even them. Because if we pull out of the Middle East, how else is a veteran supposed to eat? All lives can't matter if oil is the entity. No more clans, sets, or gangs necessary, because we know where our enemy lives and recludes. We are the 99 left behind. Together we can't lose, because the minority here, it ain't in the whole. Geronimo, Carl, and Audrey said so. And the fam that we ran with knew all truth. Yet we stopped listening, we stopped reading, and the fact left with the right. So now McGraw-Hill makes the heroes straight, cis, and white. And the public schools leak, segregationists creep. Get your vouchers, get your ass on the train away from Brown, get on board. We're shutting down Miscegenation Station. Gerrymandering ain't enough to shut them up. With this skin, I have learned to live in harmony. The best of me is dark and yet still seen. Superior is pale, is the tale the rest learn. But charcoal under pressure makes a diamond the best learn. I kiss no bums. I am no bum. And no creams I need to have fun in this sun. I am one with this sun. I am one with him, son. Active yet unmoved, I am earth. She is the ground that I am rooted in. I am not above her in any way. I am with her in every way. That is, whew, that's some pragmatic magic. So the truth stays intact, yet under attack. I am blessed nonetheless for the access. I own codes they can't crack. To be young, gifted, and Black. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That was amazing. This is an amazing poem on the screen, and I urge everybody to look at it on the screen. But to see it performed is just transforming. You know, that was an amazing performance. Thank you so much, Sydney. Yay. And now we are going to Denise, Leto. Here we go. I'm going to pin you. And now I'm going to go to the poem myself. Okay, Denise is going to read her poem, Tend the Water with Them. Denise has a framing of the poem online, so you can go and look at that. And we will, she's invited me to co-voice with her. So Denise will begin the lines of her poem, and she will then pull me in order to facilitate her vocal difference as a disability accommodation. Good. Denise, I think you're not mute. You're still muted.
Still mute. Okay,
you go.
now.
Excellent. Yeah, it's totally fine.
Okay, thank you, Petra and DJ. And it's really fun to see faces known and unknown here. So I'll just say one thing about the poem, which is that it was written in a collaboration called the Baylands Poetry Project, Aimless Wandering with Instructions. So it involves an eco-poetic exploration of the San Francisco Bay. And so this poem was written at a place called the Albany Bulb. And it's the official description is it is landfill on a wetland strip when artists and the houseless and activists call it a beautiful place and a beautiful home. So it's filled with art and sculptures and labyrinths, and it's quite beautiful. So this I wrote there, and it's called Tend the Water with Them. Mad and radiant graffiti near the rotting wooden sculpture. Dead rapture. Your heart is as big as a fist. Don't destroy our art. Two gaunt stone men on a bench leaning forward. Casket of wind in their blown stick hair. The first thing she thinks, I am glad they have company. To sit in on Serif, a dusty skeletal crumble. Twisted faces in acrid stare. Limbs of worn cord to lamp debris. In the belly of another framed sculpture, pacifier, gas tank, plastic clown, rubber spider, bike frame, toy cat, asphalt, bottle cap. She is built from ruin in our quiet. Weathered arms outstretched. Her splintery voice seeps old bay brine, a hollow glow of mouth. In a canned blink of marsh, her gnarled sanctum backlit. Dancers paint the plywood stage red. Over dirt they move with feral care in midnight witness. It's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for allowing me to read along a little bit. Thank you. I'm moving to unpin you. Okay, just technical stuffies. All right, and now we're moving to Jillian McDonald, who is going to share a video with us. So here we go to you. Thank you so much. Here you go, Jillian. You're muted, Jillian. Muted. Yeah.
Hi, I'm going to show a video as as Petra mentioned. It's about 5 minutes long. I'll just speak for a half a minute or something, tell you what it's about. I'll show it and I'll talk a little bit while it's playing. There's sound in the video, but it's quite quiet sound. It's very ambient and natural sound. So it came from the Arc Deck, and I have a practice of making video artworks in remote, often northern landscapes. I'm from the north myself, and I'm drawn to places like that. And in these videos, I am trying to highlight or tease out the kind of hauntedness of the land that is either there anyway, but maybe drawing attention to it, or inserting either performative elements by actors, usually people that I meet in that landscape or who are there with me. The works are usually made in artist residencies, so often my fellow participants are kindly asked to participate and often do, lucky for me. So there are performative elements, there are animated elements, and there are sometimes performative elements that happen later that I insert in. So this video, just to wrap up, was made in the Arctic Circle at a residency called the Arctic Circle Residency, where 30 artists and writers and some scientists sometimes come live on a boat together for 3 weeks in the Arctic, sailing around in and out of fjords. And it's stunning, going to land once a day and making work in that beautiful place. So I'm going to start the video. Now I've lost it. Oh gosh.
You first want to share screen. You're not in share screen yet.
I do know how to share screen and it's not working.
Oh, okay.
1 second, 1 second.
Sure, no worries. We have time.
It's not showing up. Oh, here we go. Very sorry. There's
Excellent.
Always technical problems with making media.
Perfectly good. All good.
So hopefully that's
we can
showing.
see it just fine.
Okay, so the video is called The Dark Season, and it's called that because in Norway, which is where it's shot, the people there refer to the polar night as the dark season. And as we were as travelers together, the artists and writers, etc., we were experiencing the polar night coming on. So every day we lost 14 minutes of light, of daylight. And in fact, it wasn't really ever completely dark. The sun would kind of go down below the horizon and sort of hover for a long time. So these are mostly just natural landscapes that were encountered there that we
Jillian, do you want to just press the button all the way on the right to make it full screen for yourself?
Sorry.
No worries.
Right?
Excellent, thank you.
The people who appear in the video are my fellow artists and eco-tourists. We were actually together in this strange place. And also some of them are inserted afterwards, but the animated elements are artificial, but made to look as though they really happened in this place. I'm not sure if you're hearing the sound. And the overall kind of idea of the video, or the, let's say, theme, I don't know about that word so much, but is the sense that the party's over. So, I mean, it's a little bit, and apocalyptic is a big word, but there's some darkness there. There's very few kind of encounters. And there are remnants left, flags flying, balloons, clowns, lost and wandering, and a few pop culture northern figures like Santa and Elsa from Frozen, pop culture Disney movie, wandering and lost in the landscape. And some things I'll also just say that this is an excerpt of the video, and it's actually just a version of the video. The actual piece is 12.5 minutes and is maybe a little bit different configuration than this one I'm showing. But another aspect of it, it's not meant to be easily understood. There are unknowns, unexplained elements, bodies that you can't really necessarily make sense of. and pieces in the landscape that we're not really sure the origin of. And a lot of stillness. This ship you can see on the left is the ship that we lived on during our time there, and it's cast in the video as a ghost ship.
Thank you. Great. Thank you so much. That was another amazing piece. And I encourage everybody who's watching right now to, in the second installment of our series here, there is a piece that Jillian is in wonderful dialogue with your piece. It's Cyrus Marcus Ware, who's the Black Lives Matter activist and a mad trans activist from Toronto. And he has created a performance piece set in Antarctica, so the Arctic and the Antarctic. And it has a really interesting and powerfully inviting approach to thinking about what the future might look like. It's set in the future Antarctica, and it, like Corey's piece, plays with notions of what colonization might look like, what unclaimed territory would look like, what indigenous territory would look like. So all these issues come up in a very, very interesting way. So I love these connections that exist between so many of the pieces throughout here. So that was wonderful. It's great to teach this together with Cyrus's piece as well. All right, so, and we're now moving to Darlene, Anita, Scott. I'm gonna pin you, here we go. And you're muted right now. Thank you, and I know your piece is relatively short, so if you'd like to read it twice, please feel free to do so, that's totally fine.
Okay, sure.
Mm-hmm.
Just to get some background on the piece comes from a collection in which I'm thinking about the People's Temple. So the People's Temple was a congregation of American citizens that immigrated to Guyana. They immigrated there because they were an interracial, mixed social class, intergenerational congregation that was practicing liberation theology in the late 60s and into the 70s. And the reason that they decided to go to Guyana was because they couldn't quite experience, and as we know of the history in this country, they couldn't experience what the civil rights movement had promised. And so they believed that in Guyana, they could create this utopia. And part of creating this utopia or this agricultural project was the full name, the People's Temple Agricultural Project. One of the things they did was make soap because they were trying to be self-sufficient there. And so this poem is about their practice of making soap, but also I think it speaks to the larger practice of when we talk about practices of hope, that they went there with this real hopefulness that they could support themselves, that they could create this utopia and so forth. And this is just an example of one of the ways that they tangibly did that. So making soap. Sweat forms a gracious call over us, hovering and humming. Do not let the lie touch your skin. Blessed babies gather in its bag of waters, until the very moment they enter this plane. Saved and placed under the bed of the dying, it lubricates the channels back. Sweat is the best we can do in our sorcery of lard and ash. Avoid inhaling fumes. Ventilate. Cover your eyes. Mix vigorously. Egyptians recorded as remedy and protection what we regard as hygiene. Like babies and the dying traversing the same plane, different directions. Invention is a kind of lie we are gifted. God is the chance we take. After all, frontier women too hovered over cauldrons, creasing their hands, yet plague. Should I read it again?
I think that would be great.
More
Yeah.
time. Okay.
Yeah.
Baking soap. Sweat forms a gracious call over us, hovering and humming. Do not let the lie touch your skin. Blessed babies gather in its bag of waters until the very moment they enter this plane. Saved and placed under the bed of the dying, it lubricates the channels back. Sweat is the best we can do in our sorcery of lard and ash. Avoid inhaling fumes. Ventilate. Cover your eyes. Mix vigorously. Egyptians recorded as remedy and protection what we regard as hygiene. Like babies and the dying traversing the same plane, different directions. Invention is a kind of lie we are gifted. God is a chance we take. After all, frontier women too hovered over cauldrons, creasing their hands, yet plague. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That was another amazing contribution and moving and so beautifully interwoven into these complicated spaces of utopia and dystopia that so many of us are engaging in. So thank you so much for contributing that. We're now going to Lesley Wheeler. Let me find you and pin you. Here we go. All right. And yes, Lesley, same thing. A fairly short poem, please. Feel free to take the time to read it twice.
I think I'm only going to read it once, but I'll try to do it well. I want to start off by saying thanks to everybody for this amazing art that we're sharing tonight. Thanks for everybody who's coming after us too, and especially to my doppelganger, the other poet, Lesley Wheeler. I just wanted to say hi to you. And of course to the editors for putting together such a beautiful and timely issue. I am coming to you from Lexington, Virginia, which is Monacan land. I want to echo Sydney in saying that this little tiny poem I'm reading to you now took years to write, in part because hope is hard, and that's what I was trying for. I find the idea of the mycelium connecting fungi underground to be an incredibly moving idea, a way of understanding connections that are not always visible. This is one of those, oh, and I should say too that hope is hard and we need it. And I really appreciated, Petra, you starting us off by saying that this is a moment of revolution, and there's no protest without a seed of hope, right? This is one of those poems in which the title slides into the first line. It's called We Could Be. We could be mycelial, eating toxins together, decomposing what's still indigestible about this place, the nasty taste. Could spread our dirty hands wide, vegetate, infiltrate, recolonize. Below ground, we could grow fat on loss, bust out in the wildest shapes, puffball, flagellate, our mistakes gorgeous in dispersal across polluted skies. Help me try. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And again, so many connections are pulling through so many of the contribution. It's a delight to see this. Okay, I'm going back to the gallery view, and we're now going to Megan Kaminski, who is going to share from her collaboration with Lesley Wheeler. So I'm going to pin you. Here we go. Megan, over to you.
Thank you. So I'm going to share one of the entries from the collection, the Prairie Divination deck that Lesley Wheeler and I are collaborating on. It's a work in progress, but we were so excited by Petra and DJ's call for work for the Practices of Hope issue, and thought specifically about the entry of Pussy Toes being appropriate. So just a teeny bit of background about the deck. We're hoping that it might be a starting point for encounter that encourages further engagement with the more than human inhabitants with which we share our lives. And in doing that, that it can help build practices that might counter extractive and exploitative relationships with the earth and with each other. So a lot of these relationships that we think of as natural, but are really rooted in colonizing values. So kind of thinking about that as a starting point for a different kind of relationship. I mean, there are lots of starting points for, anyway, that's what we were thinking. And I'm gonna share the video. Oops. Lesley made this really wonderful, and now I'm.
It's okay, take your time.
I've got it. Thank you. Lesley made this really wonderful time-lapse video of the creation of the Pussy Toes card. So I'm going to play that while I read the entry. Pussy Toes. Antenaria plantaginifolia and Antenaria neglecta. Sometimes it feels like winter will never end. When looking into a frost-lined field or down at Frozen Puddles curbside as you cross the avenue, the wintry chill can easily spread from your bones into your mind. While this cold clarity makes room for reflection and restoration, the first green sprouts of spring signal the promise of new beginnings. Prairie pussy toes, also known as early everlastings, are one of the earliest blooming wildflowers in pastures and meadows. When they arrive in a field, others are close to follow. Pussy toes' spoon-shaped leaves are covered in silver gray hairs, and the white or light pink puffy ovals of their flowers resemble the tender paws of cats. The pussy toe provides pollen for bees and is host for the American painted lady butterfly caterpillar. When this card comes into your life, it signals that new growth is on the way. Maybe you've been experiencing a period of dormancy or are ready for a change. Keep faith. Something is about to begin. This is also a reminder to treat your new starts tenderly, nurture them and welcome them into the world. How can you hold space for this growth? What bright new things are about to bloom within you and through your care? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I love this contribution to the journal so much, because as a performance artist, I love the relational work, you know, so I just love the notion that you will be reading this for somebody, that there's this exchange. And I love that it's a collaboration too. So I'm so glad to have this work in here. Yay. We both absolutely adored it. And now we're coming to our last reader. Let me again go into gallery view and let's pin Jennifer Sinor. Jennifer.
Thank you.
Okay, here we go.
I am just incredibly humbled to be reading with such amazing writers and artists. I feel very grateful and very full. I think it's just been a beautiful evening. So thank you to Margaret and Corey, Sydney, Denise, Jillian, Darlene, Lesley, and Megan, and to DJ and Petra for being the hub that brings all of these folks together. It's really an honor. I'm reading apart from an essay called Memories of the Future, and it's just thinking about how the speculative works in nonfiction. So generally we don't think of the speculative wed to a genre that takes truth at its center, but I think we're missing something when we do that. Once upon a time, a long time from now, there are monkeys who feed at ancient landfills. So begins Amy Benson's powerful essay, Lamarckian Evolution, an essay in which we wander into an art exhibit where robotic monkeys become the landfill they ingest. She writes, those familiar items, tube, cord, drinking straw, seem to be holding them up and making them terminally ill. So it's into this future that several of our babies crawl to watch a film of the landfill-made monkeys nursing its young. Our babies look at their babies drink the milk amid the ruin, and we gaze from a slit in the curtain wondering, and this is Benson, if we had swallowed the things they needed and passed them along, wondering what would happen if we left. Wondering too, I think the essay implies, if we already had. So in 3 pages, Benson lays bare the consequences that our current choices foist on a future not yet arrived. She does not provide facts, data, charts, or graphs. The experts who wield the evidence in her essay are all under the age of 3, and they do not utter a word. The I never enters the gallery, and yet the collective we understands that we are becoming in our bodies what we build. We are nursing our children on spray insulation, sequined upholstery, fabric, and rebar. Turns out Jean-Baptiste Lamarck may not have been so wrong after all. What gives Benson's essay so much power in such a compressed space are the speculative moves that she makes. An opening that reads like a scene from a science fiction novel, as well as that interesting choice of we for her narrative point of view. From the start, we, the reader, recognize that in this nonfiction essay, facts are the least of our concerns in seeking truth. Those autobiographical details that delude us into thinking that we know a character or a narrator or the person just entering the scene will be withheld. Meaning, the author insists, cannot be so easily determined. It is, after all, the surety of ego that has delivered us to this landfill. Benson herself writes in an essay on speculative nonfiction that the verifiable is a woefully incomplete account of existence. If we're going to find new ways of writing and being and creating, we must widen our understanding of genre as well as the spaces where truth resides. In Benson's essay, the present, past, and future collapse into a room and a gallery where the narrator once stood and looked around. And in that forged future, Benson writes, no one can simply sit around heartbroken. In 2007, Jason Sanford, a science fiction writer best known for his experimental short stories, argues in the New York Review of Science Fiction that the reason speculative fiction is grudgingly being accepted by the literary establishment while enjoying bestseller success with the American readership is that, and these are his words, it's almost impossible to understand today's world without the themes and tropes commonly found in speculative fiction. So for him, the speculative in fiction provides a navigation device for contemporary living. The imaginary helps us translate our own lived experience. So Sanford looks at another writer, Nancy Leibovitz's definition of genre fiction to help think about what the speculative offers. And Leibovitz gives us some interesting terms. She says, science fiction is the unknown is to be understood and thereby changed. So that's the role of science fiction. Fantasy, the unknown is to be loved for its strangeness. Horror, the unknown is to be feared. In all of these definitions, Sanford writes, the common strand is dealing with the unknown, which I just think is so fitting for the moment we find ourselves in. So given the world that is changing, the technology, globalization, connectedness, Sanford concludes that a literary fiction which ignores the unknown is unable to hold sway with readers. To stay relevant, Sanford implies literary fiction must not just borrow from speculative, but embrace it as art. So then I think about Alice Sebold's Lovely Bones, which is a book that's often looked at as one of the first to merge speculative fiction and literary fiction. And most of you would know Lovely Bones. It's a book narrated by a 14-year-old girl who has been raped and murdered. But what's so fascinating to me to consider here is that 3 years prior to writing The Lovely Bones, so 3 years prior to writing the speculative fiction, Sebold published her memoir, Lucky, which is the story of her own rape. So in trying to address the trauma of rape, it appears that the move to realistic fiction wasn't enough. She had to reach even further toward the imaginary in order to explore the real. Sebold suggests that some experiences, some truths cannot be corralled by fences built by the known, even in the world of fiction, a genre that Janet Burway reminds us is bound by what the reader is willing to believe. So then I think about what speculative might look like in literary nonfiction where the genre is bound to truth, to its claim to fact. And if we define the speculative simply as a tool, nothing else, it's just like a memoir or just like a metaphor in alliteration. It's just a tool for exploring the unknown, rather than a move away from the verifiable. Then I think we free ourselves from this tired debate over the place of truth in nonfiction, and we get much more closer to questions of craft and art. So how can the speculative be used to write something that is made more real because it incorporates the imagined? And I would agree with Sanford that art of any kind, whether literary or visual, that fails to include the unknown as part of the territory being explored is going to fail readers eventually, because we are embodied beings who experience on a daily basis how little we actually know. And there's a very interesting book called The Lifespan of a Fact by John DeGatta, where he and his co-author Jim Fingal play out the drama of this idea of fact in art in the gutters of the book, so in the margins of the book. And it's not insignificant that he does this in blood red font. So for about 120 pages, the two of them argue about the very existence of fact itself and what an essayist's responsibility is to those facts. And I think the conclusion is really important because DeGatta argues at the end that the center of literary nonfiction and art more broadly is the search for meaning. And he says the artist is working to take control of something before it is lost entirely to chaos. So art must move toward what is yet to be understood, named, tested, and known. So DeGatta writes that art must destabilize our understanding of ourselves and our world so that we can experience both anew with fresh eyes and therefore the possibility of recognizing something we've not recognized before. And in those words, I see hope. So when I talk about the speculative in my own work, I often move to someone I've written a lot about, which is Georgia O'Keeffe, the American modernist, and in particular to her painting here, Ram's Head Blue Morning Glory, which she finished in 1938. So as a viewer, we know what it is we're looking at. It's a skull of an animal and a flower. That, though, is about the extent of the verifiable. Why do the skull and the flower hover? Or are they on a wall? Or is one hovering and the other on a wall? What holds them up or pins them down? What is the relationship between the skull and the flower? Is it indeed a ram's skull? Is the flower real or artificial? So O'Keeffe gives us no narrative, but she does provide recognizable forms. Even in the title of her piece, she joins the two objects only by a comma, which grammatically both separates and binds. The viewer must complete the gap, and there's no narrative that begins with I that will ever feel satisfying here. We are meant to feel the work, not turn it into a story that we can hold. And I think O'Keeffe says it best when she says, nothing is less real than realism. So meaning becomes multiplied when we move to the speculative. Readings are generated and generated and generated. Nothing can be pinned down because the known is no longer the anchor. And yet in nonfiction, the narrator is still claiming a truth. So for example, a writer like Eula Biss, who has a very famous essay called The Pain Scale, she is saying everything there is to say about how it is impossible to fully enter another's pain, and yet the idea that pain is an experience that we all share. She writes out of her pained body, but she does not write directly of her pained body. The two hover. Readers are savvy, and sometimes what is true never actually happened. Sometimes what is true is not what is real. Degada writes that the moment we start judging a form of art by its moral value is the moment we stop talking about art. We cannot keep telling the same stories in the same way because we will arrive at the same place. Art must disrupt. It must shake us up. O'Keeffe magnified flowers on her canvas to make us really see. Her irises and cannas are real. They grow in our gardens. The way she painted them, cropping, magnifying, abstracting, startled her viewers into a new space, ultimately asking them to reconsider how it is that they look. That is the power of speculation. We enter a new space, a gallery populated by landfill monkeys, the void at the center of a peony, and we're changed. The speculative is a forceful tool in nonfiction, not simply because it unsettles readers or rounds out characters or reveals meaning, but rather because it gets us closer to naming the ineffable experience of being human. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm glad we could end on this. This is also a strand that we have throughout Practices of Hope. We have a number of people who reflect on what speculative fiction or nonfiction and solar punk and climate fiction, what these things are. So it's really interesting to connect with other people who write about other work or are editors. In the other cases, we have editors. Like in the next reading, we have the editors of a very well received solar punk collection, Sunvolt. They're going to speak to us. They wrote a piece specifically for us about what it meant to have edited the book before. So I love that, the connections, interdependence, the way that we're trying to create new community here. So it was great to hear this in this context. And DJ is going to moderate our Q&A. So I mute myself now, and I'm going to pin you, DJ.
Good. Pin me. Yes, I've asked we've had up to 47 people watching, and it's just kind of fluctuated up and down in the 40s. It's so exciting. So I asked everybody to send us questions. I'm going to start off though with my own question, kind of jumping off of Jennifer's essay, and ask a few of the poets like Lesley, Darlene. Let me scroll along here. Denise, Sydney, what do you feel is the speculative element or the biggest unknown you are working with in your pieces? So I'll start with Lesley.
I have a very strong affinity for the speculative, so I actually have my first fantasy novel out now, and I really, really loved Jennifer's essays and the proposals that she was making there. I think poetry has creates a little world. A poem does, where maybe something's possible or imagined that doesn't exist elsewhere, or that we hope might. And I do think that even though I think we often think of poetry as an art of remembering, I also think there's inherent in it a sense of projecting possibilities. And I think that's deeply speculative. Maybe not in all poems, but in an awful lot of them.
Okay, thank you. Sydney, do you have an answer for that?
Oh, sure. So I liked going through this process of sending in this poem, because when I originally wrote it, it was actually line after line of like citations where I was referring to all of the different stories or phrases that I had in the poem. So who is James? What James am I talking about from history? Who is, where are some of these lines familiar from? And who is Nina? But when I sent it in to you, I removed all of those to really play into that and allow for people to do that searching for themselves. So understanding that anyone can gain definition from any number of those lines and presume what I may have been thinking at the time, or even telling you when I wrote it, knowing where in, you know, America and what location were all of these instances and events that I'm referring to occurring. I had to really draw back from that, because as a researcher, you're so used to being very detailed about, no, this is from this and this is from that, and kind of allowing myself to play into that, allowing people to create their own understanding and truth.
That's a great answer. And I think I felt that when we first came across your poem, that I could just, connect with it where it let me, rather than having these predefined spaces. Denise, do you have something to add to that? Don't feel obligated, but.
I think so. One of the things I discovered with my collaborative partner going around the bay with the intersection of the urban with the so-called natural was the, entanglement of development and gentrification and appropriation and colonization of the land. And also, as a result, there would just be big pieces of, let's say, concrete with rebar that, look like a spider or monster, or pieces of boats or trash. And I'm not talking about found art, but just stuff, just trash and things in the detritus of capitalism just surrounding us. And so when I would sit and write, I noticed that there were a lot of monsters that would come up in response to a visual of this piece of concrete, let's say. And so it became not just a literal interaction with the environment, and even not just sort of a traditional lyric or even an experimental poem. It became this speculative kind of interaction with the environment. That surprised me, because there's so much that is grounded in going around the bay and discovering in, here's our feet on land and we're looking at, but it transformed when we brought our poetry there and when we interacted with the political history of the land. And so there was a mythology that presented itself, and that was an entryway into thinking about hope, because otherwise it's lots of disastrous things have occurred here and in this country and are at the moment, and it's difficult to know how to talk about that. And so I appreciate this community practices of hope, of thinking about that. So thank you.
Thank you. It doesn't look like we have too many questions from our wonderful audience. So Darlene, if you have something to say to that question of speculation and the unknown, and then if you guys have questions for each other, we'll have another 5 minutes. So be thinking. I'm sure you have questions for one another. Do you want to respond to that, Darlene?
Sure, I can. When I was looking at this poem, I was looking at I guess the speculative part was just trying to consider the metaphor of soap. Like, I think that Jonestown or the People's Temple is intriguing, because I think that particularly in this time, I think that it could easily, that kind of congregation could come about yet again. And so when I was thinking about this specific poem and thinking about the making of soap, how is that connected historically? Like, how does that exist on the historical continuum? And the object of soap itself, like what has it, the purposes that it served. One of them I found and I write about being a mythological, right? This idea that soap is something that you can help to make the dead, like you can put under the beds of the dead and make their transition to ancestor more smooth. And the thing about babies, their transition being the opposite direction. And so I guess the speculative part was not just looking at it. I think we were talking about verifiable fact. It was not just the fact that soap is used to clean, but soap is also used in these other kind of myth-like ways as well. And that places it certainly on the continuum of history, but also on this other continuum that's not a tangible, if you will.
Thank you. Yeah, what a great answer. I love how you picked up some of the threads from Jennifer's essay. So do any of you guys have questions for one another? We have a few more minutes. Just take over. And then I will stop you in a few minutes. Corey.
Hi, I have a question for Megan about that deck and how many, what were the other critters in that deck and how big is it?
We printed up the first half of it. So we have about 20 cards now printed, but we've been working up to probably about 50 cards. And they're all plants and animals from the tall grass prairie. So I've been doing research and writing about the space since I moved here 13 years ago, and working with some ethnobotanists at the university. Tons of these plants are growing in my yard. So it's kind of an ongoing relationship, but I just wrote about the monarch butterfly. They're really lovely, but yeah. Oh, this is one of my favorites, especially since Lesley rescued a turtle recently. And from the road in LA, and the turtle has become a member of her household. So
oh, no, she lives with it. That's great.
Oh yeah, she's got a little troop of dogs and turtles.
A turtle's like an animal and a symbol at the same time, always.
And I have a question too, actually, if that's okay.
Yeah,
Petra. Yeah. So, and I would love to have a quick question to Margaret Noodin. Maybe I would love you to speak a little bit about the relationship between language work and the speculative. I think there's some really interesting work there. I don't know whether that's something you're thinking about in language revitalization practices. Do you want to address that?
I could give my thoughts. I'm not sure that I'll have a summative kind of opinion of it. I guess, as you were asking that question, and I was thinking, oh no, DJ's gonna call on me. What I was thinking now that you have is that I think in translation, whether it's two languages that we know well, or one that we might be learning, or a language of another, and we really have to trust a translator to move between for us, there's always that sense that we aren't sure. So the speculation that we may not have it right, that there might be a piece of truth that just falls between that you can't really make clear. So I do think that I find myself when I write in one language and then in the other, I'm always looking at what the possibilities are, what might be missed, what shifts, what changes. And so you have some speculation, you have some choices to make, you have some thinking about what might happen and how we can recognize differences. And sometimes I've even thought that the space in between is one of the most interesting places. So it's when you know someone very unlike you and you can really accept each other for all the differences, that is the most delightful thing, more than staring at someone who is in your own mirror image. So I really enjoy translation, and I think it is a little bit like speculation. But thanks so much for, I think, listening to all of this, just weaving things together. It really has been a treat, really been fun.
Yeah, and Jillian, since you haven't spoken post presentation. Why don't you answer that, and we can then probably sign off. And this performance will be available for everyone to watch again and again and again, and show your grandchildren and stuff. So Jillian, do you want to answer that same speculative? I mean, obviously you work with the speculative, but what's your take on it as a filmmaker?
I guess it's not really something I think about. I mean, I don't use that word in the language of what I make, but it's interesting to think about. I'm not sure I can answer. I mean, I'm more interested actually in what you all have to say, because it's like embedded in what you're thinking about, maybe more. I mean, I guess I'm more thinking about like, yeah, I guess I just don't use that word. So it's not something that I think about, sorry.
Well, Jennifer also used the word unknown, you know, kind of as a synonym.
Yeah. I mean, I guess in this particular work, I'm thinking about like strangeness and like possibility there of like an unexpected thing. So, I mean, maybe that is speculative. It's just not a way that I have framed it in my thinking about the piece. But I think I will think about that a lot now going forward, having listened to all of you.
Thank you. Petra, I will hand it back over to you unless anyone has anything else to add.
Yes, is there someone here who hasn't spoken right now who would like to say something? Or shall we close this beautiful evening? It's just been such a delight to do this with you all. As a performance artist, it is so important to me to be with actual people, to see people, to hear people, to get a sense of who you are. Editorial work is great work, but it feels so distant to me at times. I loved encountering all your work on the page, but seeing you, hearing the words in your own mouths is so special. So I'm just so grateful that you all turned up. I hope that many of you will turn up to our next 3 readings. You will find that many of the strands that we picked up here will continue in really interesting ways. DJ, thank you for being an absolutely fabulous co-host for this whole journey, this incredibly long, beautiful journey. Thank you, everybody, and stay well. And stay in revolution and just love one another. That's the way we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye, everybody.